I think we have to take the television and the streaming revenue and be able to share that more equally with all 30 teams, of which the big markets obviously don't want to do it because they make a lot more money. But here's the argument that small and middle market teams have, which is if we don't agree to you televising our game, then you don't get that income.
All right, let's do this. We've got CBS Sports insider Jim Bowden joining us right now. Also find his work in The Athletic. I've been told we got some fancy front office animation that we will unveil, not yet, in a couple weeks. So stay tuned on that one. But I know we're almost there. We're almost there. Something for everyone to look forward to. JB, Pete Alonso, back to the Mets. How do you think he feels, and what do you think the conversation was like at the dinner last night in Tampa between him, Boris, owner Steve Cohen, front office leader David Stearns?
Yeah, I think Scott got the $30 million that he wanted in the front year for Pete Alonso. I mean, this is the same kind of deal he did with Blake Snell a year ago. You know, I think the way the Mets viewed his value was somewhere around $24 million in between Matt Olson and Freddie Freeman. That's where they wanted to land. And Scott wanted to do that Blake Snell, Cody Bellinger deal, which is, you know what? I'll get $30 million. I'll opt out after 1 year. If he gets injured or has a bad year, I've got 2 years at $54 million booked, so I can always play the second year for $24 million. But, you know, with Juan Soto hitting in front of me, let me go hit 40 home runs. I'll put up a big year, and I'll go right back in the market, and I'll get my 5 years at 26 or my 5 years at 28. And I already got 30 up front towards what I want to get to. So, you know, if you're going to do a short-term deal, Scott has made a huge living for star players doing it this way. And Pete wants that long-term deal. He's just going to have to get 2 or 3 contracts to get the same amount he wanted in the first place.
Now, let me ask you this. That long-term deal, was there an opportunity to get that long-term deal? I mean, whether it was with another team or just the Mets, like what happened in that situation? I know Pete really wanted to, you know, solidify himself as a Met for the rest of his career. So was there any opportunity for them talking and finalizing, you know, close to $200 million is what we were expecting?
Yeah, I think early on he had a chance to get, I think it was somewhere between 160, 165, somewhere along a long time ago. And then when free agency occurred and Juan Soto got his deal, then the Mets went shorter term. So the choice was either this 2-year 54 or 3 years at $72 million. And, you know, they want the longer term deal. And, you know, as Scott can show him, he's had a lot of clients in his career that he's done a short term deal with. And then you go back on the market and you go and do it again. And from the Mets perspective, you know, you love the short term deal because you love the fact that Pete has to perform to continue to pay him at this level. And look, they can extend him again later if they decide to. If he hits 40 home runs and they want to give him a 4 or 5 year deal in the offseason, you know, they can do that as well. So, look, I think this is a win short term for Pete. I know he didn't get the long term deal he wanted, but I think they waited too long, right? I mean, they waited and all of a sudden the Yankees filled up first base, Arizona filled up first base. The Seattle Mariners didn't have any money to play at the position. So, you know, the position dried up really quickly. There weren't a lot of options at the end. They tried to get San Francisco in, but Buster Posey said, look, I don't believe in opt-outs. I'm not going to do it. Toronto really wants to sign Guerrero and put their money there, and they signed Santander. So at the end of the day, there weren't a lot of options for Pete, but he ended up doing a really good short-term deal, I think, considering the circumstances.
Can this, exactly what you just said, be kind of a precursor to, hey, we don't want to go past this 3 years, whether it's Stearns or not, but a Vladdy coming on the market next year, the Mets being a big player? Because we've seen teams kind of like go, you know what, like the Dodgers kind of had their one rebuild year so they could go in with Shohei and everything. I know it's not a rebuild year, but it's a Dodgers rebuild year. Could this be indicative of that possibly down the road here, or not even on the same stratosphere?
Yeah, the reason it's not the same conversation is all because of age, right? I mean, the only reason Juan Soto got $760 million is he hit the market at 25 or 26 years old. So because Vladdy is so young, he's going to get, I predicted in my article in The Athletic that he'd get 12 years, $477 million. He may get more than that. But, you know, Guerrero is that 320 hitter with 30 home runs and in your 20s. And so I think those players are going to get paid. But I got to tell you, based on all of their algorithms and all of the analytics, the clubs are nervous about players that are north of 31 years old. and especially power hitters. And so, I think most clubs are going to be very conservative in that area of players. But if you get to the market at 25, 26, 27, you're going to get the years and you're going to get the dollars.
Can the front offices look past that analytical part? Because, when you look at Pete, 124, 126, OPS plus, they're just not, even his best year was 146, so he's not even close to that elite level. Is there an organization that has been leaning towards looking past that to be able to just go get a guy that they really think they need?
It only takes one team, right?
Right.
That's how the market changes. It only takes one GM, one owner out of the 30 to go against the grain and go there. In Pete's case, what is he? He's a below average defender at first. He's a 40 home run bat. But I also think what he proved last year in the postseason is he can perform in the biggest moments on the biggest stage. And he also proved everyone that he can play in the New York market and succeed in the New York market. So he's got a lot of intangibles around him. I think if you wanted to look at all the first basemen, he doesn't belong in the conversation with Freddie Freeman or Vladimir Guerrero Jr., or in my opinion, not even Matt Olson. But 40 home runs, how many first basemen are there that hit 40 home runs or have the potential to do that? Not a lot. So if you can get them on shorter term deals and you don't have to worry about the back end of the deals, remember, I think when you look at the Padres, they're going to regret paying Xander Bogaerts to 40. They're going to regret paying Manny Machado to 40. And clubs don't want to be in that position because when you get to that point, it really hamstrings you on being competitive at that point. So David Stearns is a smart guy. He didn't want to go long-term with Pete, and he found a way not to go long-term.
JB, the owners' meetings are happening right now in Florida. We're going to cover this later in the show, but I want to get the front office perspective of what's happening there. Your colleague over at The Athletic, Evan Drellick, has written about how they're debating how they want to handle a potential salary cap situation and that push in a couple of years and how long they'd be willing to sit out and not have games go on after the expiration in 2026 for the 2027 season. One other thing I want to add to the mix here and then get your thoughts is Drellick just reported that 2 new MLB owners are joining Rob Manfred's executive council at the owners' meetings. That's Steve Cohen of the Mets. We're really going on the opposite side of the spectrum here. And John Fisher of the A's, which joins a team of 6 others, owners of the Angels, D-backs, Giants, Guardians, Marlins, and Red Sox. So I'll kind of open the floor here to your thoughts on how any of this works and what you see happening. John Fisher is an interesting choice to be on any committee in baseball right now.
Yeah, and I think what Commissioner Manfred's trying to do is to bookend the biggest market owner with the smallest owner market and then try to figure out how everyone can come together to get with a system that works a little bit better here. Look, I think most teams outside of New York, Los Angeles, maybe Philadelphia would like to have some kind of salary cap where there's a floor and there's a ceiling and then there's a range within there. Maybe you use 100 million differential where the highest team is here and the lowest team has to at least be 100 million less than that, some kind of range like that. Salary caps have never, the whole concept has never worked in the past. No one's ever bought in on the Players Association side. And I think that's the biggest part is that I think that as we learned over the last several CBAs, the most important thing is to get on board with the Players Association and work with them to try to find a system that works. I know there's a lot of players who are opposed to a salary cap, but I think if it's done properly, there is a way that it works. I don't think MLB would ever be able to do a cap system that is successful like the NFL and the NBA have, where you literally have parity, where you literally have small market teams that have a chance to compete with the big markets. But you can bring it a lot closer. And I think what we've seen the last couple of years is Dodgers, Yankees, Mets, Phillies have kind of run away from most of the pack here. And I know we've tried to correct that with the luxury tax and the CBT issues and taking away draft picks, but all of those moves really haven't worked well enough. So I think we have to still keep trying to find ways. And I got to tell you, if I'm a player, look, I want to make sure I maximize salaries, but I also want to make it more competitive with all 30 teams. So hopefully both sides can find a way to creatively kind of embrace the idea of a salary cap and try to find a way to make it work.
All right. A couple things here, Jim. One, excuse me, you're not getting a salary cap without a salary floor, okay? Right. And when you have a team like the Marlins, even you can throw in the White Sox, the Pirates, and they have their low salaries for their floors, you're going to have to get that up. Right now, you have a soft salary cap, luxury tax. Some teams just don't care about it, right? Why? The Dodgers have a better TV deal. The Mets have a better TV deal. The Yankees have a better TV deal. John Middleton wants to win. You're never going to get that to be equal. Now, you brought up the other leagues. What is the NBA, the NHL, the NFL, what do they always argue about? How much revenue, because it's all based on the revenue in the sport, right? The owners aren't ever going to show you all the revenue that they're getting. They're never going to do it. You worked in the front office. You know how this works. They don't show you all the revenue. The Braves have to. They're publicly traded. I'm sure there's ways they can kind of finagle some stuff too. I don't know how all that works. It's way smarter than I am. But until you can get the owners to open their books and say, hey, yeah, we made $15 billion as a sport last year, and players are supposed to get 50% of that, owners are supposed to get 50% of that, and you get all the other outside companies that the owners use to hide money and finagle their business models, it's always going to be an argument. So that's why in other leagues you see the NBA arguing over it all the time. You see the NFL arguing over it. Oh, they're saying they're making $10 billion when they're really making $13 billion. It's never going to stop, even if you put a cap in. It's just a way. It'll be just different finances. I don't know. I don't think it's going to work. I don't know how you make it closer, like you said, unless you get a floor. And if you get a floor, the owners are going to want a cap. I don't know. I just don't think it's going to work, and it's going to get nasty here the next one if the owners dig in on this.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you have to do is you have to I think we have to take the television and the streaming revenue and be able to share that more equally with all 30 teams, of which the big markets obviously don't want to do it because they make a lot more money. But here's the argument that small and middle market teams have, which is you can't if we don't agree to you televising our game, then you don't get that income. So if every team outside of the two New York teams, the Dodgers and the Phillies, if all the other teams, the 26 teams, say you can televise all the games you want, but just you can't televise our games. If you're not going to give us equal revenue, then you can't televise it. Then what is the value of TV you're not going to be able to televise your games? And that's the kind of the argument the small and middle markets can get to get more revenue sharing that creates an easier path, I think, with the players to have that argument for a cap. I agree with you completely. You cannot have a salary cap without a floor. You can't sit there also and share revenues with teams like Miami, the Athletics, the Pirates. You can't share all this revenue and then not force these teams to spend not just what they're getting, but more than what they're getting, right? And so, yeah, we have an issue at both ends right now, and I think we need to share more revenue. We need to have a floor. You need to have a cap that works. And opening the books, yeah, that is the right answer, and you're right. There are a lot of owners that will never let that happen, but you certainly can argue if you're the players that there's certain revenue streams that the players should be able to audit, and those are the bigger revenue streams.
More in a minute, but first, a quick word from our sponsor of this video. Hey, Valentine's Day is coming up, and we have the recommendation for you to check out right now. Don't wait. It's 1-800-Flowers.com. This year, we're partnering with 1-800-Flowers to make sure you're a Valentine's legend with an exclusive offer for the FT fam. It's double the roses for free. When you buy 1 dozen, they're going to double your bouquet to 2 dozen roses. It's the perfect way to wow her without breaking the bank. 1-800-Flowers always delivers. Let them dominate this holiday. It's what they do best.
Think about everyone in your fam that deserves some love on Valentine's Day. I sent a bouquet to my daughter at college, and it lit up her day. I also added an awesome vase to the order for her, so she's got it all.
All roses from 1-800-Flowers are picked at their peak, cared for every step of the way, and shipped fresh to ensure lasting beauty. Don't wait. Think ahead this year. Make it easy and get that deal right now. When you order 1 dozen, they'll double the rose bouquet for free. That's the FT deals that we're always looking out for. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/FT. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/FT. And now back to the video.
How contentious do these owners' meetings get? Because I've been in Players Association meetings, and you have people at different ends of the spectrum on things. Is it the same way with the owners? Because they put out a picture of, oh, we agree with each other all the time. And yet some of the things you see, you're like, I don't think he agrees with that.
Yeah, so I was in a lot of the owners' meetings. And in fact, there was one year that I was the acting owner of the Reds when my owner was suspended for a year. And that was during one of the CBA negotiations in the mid-'90s. And I can tell you that it gets very contentious, a lot of anger. You have little cliques, little groups, right? So I was in that lower middle market kind of ownership group, and I had the small markets, the real small markets, trying to pull me in. I had the big markets trying to pull me up because they needed my vote, right? But it is intense because they're totally different. You know, even the GM jobs, they're totally different. If you're a big market GM or a small market GM, they're totally different jobs. And if you're an owner, it's a whole different level. If you're in the top third of the industry, so one thing that the teams do is the teams, when they're done voting, they try to get everyone to make it unanimous so they can have a solid front to the public. So let's just say if the voting on something ended up being 22-8, there's a lot of times that gets announced as unanimous because those 8 teams are asked very nicely, let's make this one unanimous like all of them. So yeah, they like to do that, but it's like any group of people. Not everybody's ever going to agree. They all have different needs, they all have different problems, and they all have different philosophies. And so it's like every other group in America, right? It's a group of 30 people that all have their own personal agendas. They want what they want, and so you got to try to find a way to make the industry all happy. But behind the scenes, no, it's just like any other. It's just like the players' side.
I view it as a Royal Rumble. They're all just in a cage, and it's just all the owners, and whoever gets thrown out says, we agreed to everything. Speaking of agreeing to things, how do the medicals work with not only with trades, but also with what happened with Hoffman? Because we think about Jack Flaherty's trade, and it came out, the Yankees were like, we're not real sure about his medicals. Well, that hurts everybody. What are you not sure about? Let everybody know. Same with Hoffman. He got failed and ended up signing with the Blue Jays, which is good for him. But how does that all work? And why does some of it leak out and not others?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Eric. A lot of people don't know the answer to these things. So part of the job as a general manager is risk management, and you're like an insurance underwriter yourself. That's your responsibility. So when you do a medical with players, I always use 2 orthopedic doctors, the team one, and then I would use James Andrews out of Alabama. And you would get all the information. And what you find is, as an example, almost every pitcher in baseball has some kind of tear in their shoulder, some kind of tear in their elbow. Every position player has something that's degenerative. It could be a back, it could be a knee. There's always something with players, right? And so the doctors tend to protect themselves, right? They don't want to recommend something and then a guy gets injured. And then they're the ones in their mind responsible for the millions that you lost because he's on the injured list, right? So they tend to tell you to stay away in general. So then you have to look at each GM and what their position is long-term, short-term, right? So Alex Anthopoulos of the Braves is signed long-term. Mike Elias is going to be in Baltimore long-term. So they look at Jeff Hoffman's situation, 3-year, $33 million deal, and the doctors have some issues with him medically, which we can't talk about. There's HIPAA laws. But they have risks there. And they don't want to sit there and pay $33 million to a guy that might get injured after 1 year. They don't want to sit there and have that money sitting on the books, so they pass. You didn't pass the physical, we're going to move on. Now you get to Toronto, you have Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins. Their contracts are up this year. They got to win, or they may not have their jobs a year from now. They got to win now. So they may look at the medicals a little bit different, saying, you know what? Yeah, there's risk here. This is the only way we're going to sign him, is on a 3-year deal. Let's roll the dice. We got to win now anyway. Let's win. We'll get our contracts. And then if he blows out, we have enough resources to be able to replace him. Let's take that gamble. And I can tell you, in my career, I signed Ron Gant after he got in a motorcycle accident, broke his legs. The Braves released him. And my doctor said, don't sign him. I don't think he'll ever play again. I ended up signing him, with a low base with incentives. And he helped lead our team to the NLCS the next year against the Braves, ironically. So I kind of went against the medicals of the doctors, and then it paid off. Another time I traded for Scott Olson, a left-hand pitcher for the Marlins, because I wanted an outfielder, Josh Willingham, that was in the deal. And the medicals weren't great on Olson. They went through the risk with me, and I'm like, I'll take a chance anyway. And that one didn't work. But again, that's on me. That's the gamble or the risk that the GM gets. Now, in the case of Flaherty that you mentioned, last July, the Tigers and Yankees agreed to a trade, Flaherty to the Yankees for a really good prospect. When the Yankees did the medicals, they didn't like the risk. And remember, it was just 1 year. They didn't want to give up the prospect because they didn't know Flaherty would be healthy in October. Now, the Tigers disagreed. They thought he was healthy. The Dodgers thought the medicals were fine. They said, let's go. We'll make the deal. The Dodgers won the World Series. Flaherty was a part of that. So now he goes on to the open market. Teams are now all looking at the medicals. They're like the Yankees. They don't love the risk here. Even the Tigers that traded him didn't love the risk either. So they're like, short term, okay. Long term, I don't know. So they structured the deal with him, right? $25 million this year. If you make 15 starts, the next year will be $20 million if you could pitch a half a year. Otherwise, it's $10 million, and you get an opt-out after 1 year. So again, it's all about the medical risk. Same thing the Red Sox did with Walker Buehler on that 1 year, $20 million deal. He didn't get a long-term deal. Same thing. Teams don't like the risk of the medicals. So it's just a big part of GM's jobs is get all the information on the health, and then it's up to you to make the decision of what kind of risk you're willing to take or not take.
I love that. What a great explanation. Except you got to tell us who the prospect was that they were going to give up for Jack Flaherty. You can't say just a good prospect.
I can tell you it was a middle infielder. How's that?
Okay, we'll take that. Our pinstripe territory, Derek guru that he is, he'll figure it out for you for the rest of us.
Durbin. I'm guessing Durbin because he got traded later
That would be my
on.
guess. But.
Yeah. All right, last one. Let's talk about youngsters here because you wrote an article about the top 30 potential Rookie of the Year candidates that you're excited to watch in spring training. Little controversy at the top. Jackson Jobe is number 1 on your list. Roki Sasaki is on this list too, but he is in the 3 spot. So, JB, I want you to explain, your thought process at the top. Then everyone can read the article to get the rest because we don't have time. And I do want to preface it by saying that you like to go against the grain on prospects that you like versus many other publications, right? I think you were probably the highest person on, I want to say Jackson Churio, and I might be missing someone else in the past 10 years. I want to say maybe an Acuna, but I'm also going to give people the bad. You were a big Jordan. Who was it?
Juan Soto was my big one.
Soto was your big one.
Robles, right? It was Soto that was my guy. Yeah.
I'm going to give them 1 and 1, JB, just to be fair, okay? So Soto was your big one over Robles when many others had Robles. That's a massive win. The latest one, I would say on the other end would be Jordan Walker. That has not worked out yet, right? You've been higher on him than others, although we can make a case that he hasn't really been given a full chance, a full runway, so still TBD. But anyway, tell me about this one.
Yeah, and I was wrong on Wyatt Langford last year too. But by the way, I'll be right on both Langford and Walker. I just am not right on the timetable. The prime years are 24 to 31, and a lot of times I get too excited when they're 21 and 22. But then a couple years later they hit. So the reason, look, this particular article wasn't ranking prospects; it was ranking guys to win Rookie of the Year. And so the reason I have Jackson Jobe at the top of my list, number 1, I think he's the second best pitching prospect in baseball behind Sasaki. Throws 98, 99. He's got a wipeout slider, a plus change, plus cutter for that matter. Love the delivery, love the command, love the composure. But it's more importantly, he's going to be in a 5-man rotation instead of the 6-man rotation that Sasaki's in. And the Tigers don't have to baby his innings. He'll be the 3rd starter after Skubal and Flaherty in the rotation. A.J. Hinch is not afraid to put him out there every 5th day. And I'm a big believer in the stuff and the command that it brings to the table. As much as I think Sasaki is a better pitching prospect with the higher ceiling, I don't think he's a finished product. I'm a little bit leery about the velo being down a little bit. I think he needs a little bit more development. He's going to be in a 6-man rotation on a team that has 10 legitimate big league starters and 5 number 1 starters. And they tend to like to baby their pitchers now in the regular season because they know they're going to play in October anyway. And they like to get their pitchers all set up for the month of October, which is what matters the most to that organization. So I just kind of feel like I've got Jobe over Sasaki just because I think he's going to get more starts, more volume. And that's a difference maker. So that's why I've got him over Sasaki for this list.
Right, for this Rookie of the Year candidate list. Very different from how you're projecting prospects going forward, but that's for another time. JB, great to have you on. We'll catch you next week, okay?
Thanks, guys.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.